I can't in good conscience do it, Dave, but I like what you're selling. I just won't buy it. Kind of like a ShamWow. It looks really cool on TV, and I'm like, that seems useful. Not
Yeah,
gonna buy it
maybe.
though.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'll come back with a good infomercial that I can comp Kyle
Flex
Pitts
tape.
to by the
That's
time
what
you're done.
Kyle Pitts. That's what Kyle Pitts is. Kyle Pitts is flex
No,
tape.
because Flex Tape
Where
actually like fixes things. Kyle
no,
Pitts
it
isn't
does not.
fixing
I've
your
used it.
roster. I haven't. I mean, you just slap a hole on a leaking barrel of water. Kyle Pitts isn't
No,
going to do
yeah,
that for your
I've
lineup. He's
never
not
put
going to
it.
help a thing.
I've never put it on my canoe whilst in the canoe in a lake. No, never done it. It's week 4, and you need to be trading for these players ASAP. Dave, Kluge, and I are going to be talking about a few players that you need to be buying low before week 4 kicks off. Dave, let's not waste any time. Why don't we jump into this? You've got a running back that you believe our audience needs to be buying low immediately.
And there's not many running backs that I would recommend buying on the trade market right now because they all kind of stink. Alfredo, remember a couple days ago, you and I were talking off camera, and we went through the top 24 running backs in ADP, and there were like 3 that you feel good about. It's been a rough year for running backs so far, but I
It's so
am
bad.
trying to buy Aaron Jones. I mean, he was lighting up the Bears in week 1, and I know it's the Bears. They're terrible. But A.J. Dillon, we talked about it on yesterday's show. We're talking about him as a cut candidate. So if you're cutting A.J. Dillon from your team for his lack of efficiency and his lack of production, that means you should probably be buying the other running back in this backfield. He's going to get a full workload as soon as he comes back. I mean, this Packers offense has been, they're still winning games, don't get me wrong, but they haven't looked as good as they did in week 1 when Aaron Jones was in the lineup. Aaron Jones has been a top 10 running back in PPR leagues every single year dating back to 2019. That is 3 straight years that we have seen an RB 10 finish or better. I'm sorry, 4 straight years of an RB 10 finish or better. I misspoke. It was back to 2018. So there's no reason to think that he doesn't continue this now with the workload that he's going to see on a pretty explosive offense. And right now, his managers could be sweating. You know, he was a 3rd or 4th round draft pick and has only played half a game of football, basically. So his guys, his managers in your fantasy league might be sitting at 1-2 or 0-3 and looking to shake things up a little bit. The last thing that jumped out to me, and I'm just going to share this as a funny little tidbit on Aaron Jones. He is 4th among all running backs in receiving yards. He hasn't touched a football since the 3rd quarter of week 1. I mean, he's just an explosive playmaker on a good offense. He's a guy right now that I would be trying to buy for cheap if possible.
And I really love that the Green Bay Packers offense is still, I don't want to say thriving. That seems too strong of a word, but I mean, they're putting up points, and Jordan Love is still able to run this offense. And we keep saying he's doing it without Christian Watson. He's doing it without Aaron Jones. I almost said Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he is doing it without Aaron Rodgers. But I think we're seeing what an important part of this offense that Aaron Jones is. And it's funny because like I texted you earlier this morning when we were doing this exercise, and I was looking at what are there running backs that I really want to buy low. And as I was going through
Not
the
many.
whole list, there's just, I mean, there's guys that you could certainly label as candidates, but there was nobody that I really felt comfortable with except for Aaron Jones. So I like this. I think this is a good pull here.
So let me throw a few spicy names out there that I would be
Spice.
interested. DeAndre Swift right now, you know, he has had his most and 3rd most career touches in back-to-back games. I don't know if that's sustainable over a full season. So I'd prefer Aaron Jones, who we know has a long track record of success in production, over DeAndre Swift. Miles Sanders right now, you know, he's been producing, but I think Aaron Jones has such a higher ceiling. If anybody is trying to sell Alexander Mattison after his pretty solid week 3 outing, I would much prefer Aaron Jones to Alexander Mattison. Even Ramondre Stevenson, who is struggling with his efficiency right now and ceding a lot of work to Ezekiel Elliott. These are all some guys that I would be more than happy to move for Aaron Jones right now.
Can I do it? Can I say one more?
Are you going to say Kyron Williams?
I'm going to say Kyron Williams. Yeah.
I didn't want to say it because I knew you were going to. I just set you up.
Yeah.
LeBron James, alley-oop up to Dwayne Wade. Slam it home. Let's hear it, Alfredo.
It's actually the other way around. Dwayne Wade to LeBron James.
It is, yeah.
Just
Of course, the Heat fan would correct me on that one.
Watch a highlight reel, like just anything. Do some due diligence. I mean, yeah, like why not? We saw what happens in this offense if Kyron Williams. I mean, if he doesn't get touchdowns, we see what happens. If he's not getting 6 receptions in a game, we see what happens. Now, I'll say this: there's still a lot of good points to argue from the other side
Mhm.
of that. Is like why you keep him 100%
So
of the running back work. I get it. I just don't know how sustainable it's going to be.
somebody asked me on Twitter, they said, should I start Aaron Jones or Kyron Williams this week? And I said, do you want the bad player that's getting all of the snaps, or do you want the good player that's getting some of the snaps? And he said, I just want who's going to score more points. And I said, well, good luck, because I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, if we do, I love that it's put that way. I just want the guy who's going to score more points. Yeah, don't we
Don't we
all?
all?
Don't
Don't
we
we
all?
all?
All right. Well, if you're enjoying this conversation so far and you're enjoying getting some buy low candidates to help out your fantasy football team, please like this video. It's a big help to us. And drop your trade questions in the comments below. I'm going to get back to every single one of them. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We are bringing you this show every Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, every single week of the fantasy football season. And then make sure you're subscribed to the podcast where we bring you a 5th episode on audio only. And then Sunday mornings, we are with you doing the live Q&A, answering your questions about who you should start or sit.
I mean, your dog got excited as soon as you mentioned that Q&A. It's good stuff.
I know.
I can hear him in the background.
Yeah, no, they're both really excited. I was really trying to talk over it. Doesn't work. All right, I'm going to give you my first buy low trade target right here. And I'm going to be a little bit of a homer, but let's go with wide receiver Jaylen Waddle from the Miami Dolphins. And this is a guy that, I mean, I think all of us before the season were ranking him as a top 10 or top 12 wide receiver. And I would say that I think there's a lot of, I call it like the magician effect. There's a lot of look at what's going on over here, and then no one's seeing the sleight of hand elsewhere. Everyone right now is looking at Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa, Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, and I think we've gotten to a point where Jaylen Waddle's become the forgotten man in this offense, despite actually producing pretty well. The thing is that he was just quiet enough in his first couple games, at least 4 receptions and 78 yards in both of those games, which not bad to have a guy that's hovering around 80 yards per game receiving. We know that he can also create plays. Dolphins offense loves to set up for yards after the catch, and Jaylen Waddle is leading the NFL in yards after the catch per reception. This is just a guy that we know continues to make plays, whether he did it as a rookie, whether he's doing it as a sophomore. Now he's going into his 3rd year in the NFL with a potential MVP candidate at quarterback. It's so crazy to be saying this after where we were last year with Tua Tagovailoa and years before that with Brian Flores. But this offense just looks phenomenal. We've been hearing crazy claims of greatest offense ever. Maybe it's not that crazy, but I mean, after 3 weeks, it looks pretty good. And I want to have any part of this offense that I can. Now, I don't know how sustainable some of those running backs are going to be throughout the season, but as long as he's healthy, Jaylen Waddle is a guy that I want on my roster. And right now, there's no soft tissue injury. He was held out last week due to a concussion. For me, everything seems to be, to use your phrase, Dave, wheels up for Jaylen Waddle. And I think that this is the very short window where you can buy low to get a guy on this offense who could potentially be one of the top 2 weapons in the league's best offense.
Yeah, I actually just, I like where your head's at. This morning, I threw out and trying to take advantage of some fandom here. This is a Packers fan in my fantasy league, but with Christian Watson coming back, I threw Christian Watson out for Jaylen Waddle. Still pending. I don't know if it'll be accepted or not. Probably not. But yeah, he's been off to a slow start. And some people are starting to panic a little bit, especially with missing time. So I'm trying to get Waddle where I can. He's a very interesting player because he's been in the league for 2 years now. And if you look at year 1, he was a target hog. I mean, pulling like a 30-something% target share as a rookie, a low ADOT player, wasn't too efficient, but was the primary weapon. And then all of a sudden, Tyreek Hill showed up. And then Jaylen Waddle kind of changed his role a little bit. He wasn't pulling nearly the same amount of targets, but his efficiency skyrocketed. And that's what happens when you have defenses focusing on a guy like Tyreek Hill. So he's shown that he can get it done either way. He can either be the lead guy and get a ton of targets, or he can be the number 2 guy and be wildly efficient with those targets. So it seems like there's really no way that Jaylen Waddle can lose, regardless of who the target competition is, regardless of who else is getting it fed on the offense. Jaylen Waddle is going to get it done.
Yeah, and honestly, the way I look at this too is I think that we go very literal, and I've had this claim against me that I'm very literal when talking about.
I don't even know what that means. I saw that.
I don't know.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know. Like, do you take things at face value? I don't get it. So yeah, when we talk about buying a player low, I think sometimes we look a little too hard, and it's like, who is the worst running back right now? I'm gonna buy low on that guy. Sometimes it's okay to just buy medium, right? Because Jaylen Waddle is
Yeah.
still a bit lower right now than his normal value should be, and I think that's where we're at. It's not a guy who's just his performance has been atrocious or he's just been underperforming. I think it just we haven't seen the big breakout just yet, and I think that right now everyone's forgotten about him. And so this guy seems like the perfect candidate for me leading into week 4 to be a trade target. Now, before we continue on, I want to remind you guys, talked about it a little bit before, but the audio version of this show, we bring you a 5th episode every single week where we preview the matchups, we discuss the news and notes from the week, take a look at the injuries, all before we get to game day on Sunday. Now, the link for that is in the description down below. And if you leave a review, okay, screenshot that, send it over to Kluge at Football Guys. That's Kluge, just like my co-host here. And you send it over to Dave. He's going to answer any one of your fantasy football questions. Now, just one. Don't get crazy with it, okay? Don't write a paragraph in there of all kinds of questions for Dave. But if you go ahead and leave that review, screenshot it, send it over to Kluge at footballguys.com. Dave will answer your questions.
Yeah, whether it's a trade, start, sit, waiver questions, whatever it is, just fire it over my way. More than happy to help.
All right, Dave, let's get into your next buy low trade target.
So I talked about this guy in our week 2 show, right after week 1. I said, go out and buy T. Higgins, coming off that week 1 donut where he pulled 8 targets and had 0 receptions. Well, after his 4.1 point PPR outing in week 3, I think there might be another opportunity to buy low on T. Higgins. And I'm just going to keep beating the drum for this guy because he's one of my favorite receivers in the league. And anytime he comes off a quiet game, I'm going to tell you to go out and buy him because he can put up elite production when he's out there. Now, people are going to see kind of what his season has looked like so far. 0 points in week 1, 28.9 points in week 2, and then 4.1 in week 3. But embrace the variance. You got to ride the highs with the lows. We heard this about Tyler Lockett year after year. He might not be a steady contributor week in and week out, but when he's on the field and when he's healthy, he is going to give you elite upside. He is one of 12 players to see 8+ targets in every single game so far this season. Now, obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals offense has been a little bit odd. You know, they haven't really been gelling. Joe Burrow has not looked like himself, but it seemed like in the second half of week 3, things started to come together. So you got to hope that you can just buy into this entire Bengals offense and things are going to improve there. Now, just 2 years ago, we saw T. Higgins pull a 24% target share, which is elite for wide receivers. And then people look last year and see that drop to 18.6. But I think that needs to be taken with a grain of salt because in 4 of 16 games, 25% of his games from last season, he played less than 65% of the snaps, limited with an injury, knocked out of the game early with an injury. In the games where he was fully healthy, he was pulling 8.3 targets per game, 5.5 receptions, 77 yards, and scoring a touchdown in 2 and 3 outings. His 17
That's a lot of
points per
numbers.
game.
That is so many numbers.
Well, let me sum it up. He was averaging 17 points per game in the games where he was healthy, which would have been good for wide receiver 8 in scoring. This offense is only going to get better as Joe Burrow heals up and gets healthier. I am absolutely trying to buy T. Higgins as a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy if I can.
And I think that some people might look at T. Higgins and say, well, you know, he's been surviving off touchdowns. He's got 2 touchdowns in the year. Those are Joe Burrow's only 2 passing touchdowns right now. And I think if you kind of dive in a little bit deeper, Dave, what you're talking about is that target share. There's been a lot of off-target throws to T. Higgins, a lot of YOLO balls, as we'll call it, you know, where he's just throwing it up there for T. Higgins, hoping he comes down with the 50-50 balls, things that are off target. Joe Burrow just hasn't been himself. So as long as he is consistently progressing through his rehab, he's healing up, which everything indicates he should, right? We haven't seen anything that says that he is more likely to sustain a re-injury. I do love this idea of buying low on T. Higgins, which, by the way, ranked like right next to Jaylen Waddle as we were starting out the season. It was that little that tier of T. Higgins, Jaylen Waddle, Garrett Wilson,
Devonta
Chris
Smith.
Olave, Devonta Smith. All those guys were in that same range, and we're seeing some of them are performing just up to par, some of them way below, and a couple of these guys we should see them turn it around as the season goes on.
Now, I mentioned real quickly that T. Higgins is one of 12 players to see 8+ targets in every single game so far this year. You want me to run through this list real quickly? There's a lot of the guys that you'd expect. Keenan Allen, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, T. Higgins, Mike Evans. Here are the ones that jumped out to me, though, and really surprised me. Michael Pittman, TJ Hawkinson, Michael Thomas, and get ready for it, Tutu Atwell. So I would throw all of those guys as potential buy lows as well. I mean, Tutu might still be available on your waiver wire, but he's looking like a pretty steady part of this offense so far.
Yeah, I'll be intrigued to see how that Rams offense changes once Cooper Kupp comes back. But
Yeah.
just 2023, what's going on?
If
We're in week 4. We're talking about Tutu Atwell being a guy to go out and get. All right, let's move on here. I'm going to give you my second buy low trade target, and it's Calvin Ridley, wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And before the season, I don't know if there was anyone that was very lukewarm or medium on Calvin Ridley. I think we were, but it felt like looking
there's
outside.
a line in the sand, you were either 100% in or 100% out, and we were just like, he's okay at the cost.
Yeah, it felt like we reached a point where Calvin Ridley was too expensive to get on your team, and he really had to play extraordinarily well to bring back the return on the draft value there. But now Calvin Ridley, there's a little bit of a buy low window here where the Jaguars passing attack has not looked as good as everyone thought it would. And I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, the Jaguars are essentially leading the league in what I'm going to call almost touchdowns. They have so many passes here from Trevor Lawrence that were almost touchdowns based on a foot not getting in bounds or a ball just being off the fingertips of a player. Calvin Ridley himself had a 30-yard would-be touchdown in this last week, and that would have been the difference between him being currently the wide receiver 37 or the wide receiver 20. We're talking about one single play making such a big difference for him. And that's the kind of thing that you need context with these players of if there's that one play or that one little thing that's missing or a part of a team that can improve, especially this Jaguars passing attack. I do see that as something that's being able to, something that should be able to improve as the season goes on. We're already seeing Trevor Lawrence leads the NFL in deep ball passing grade, according to Pro Football Focus. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, their wide receiver core, they lead the league in drops. So right now, they're not doing Trevor Lawrence any favors. That offense is stalling out a bit. I can't imagine that this wide receiver core of Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Calvin Ridley, all guys that have been pretty reliable throughout their careers, are going to continue to lead the league in drops. We should see some, you ready for it, Dave? You ready? We should see some regression to the mean in terms of touchdown receptions and passing touchdowns for this Jacksonville Jaguars team. Calvin Ridley, we know he's got the talent. He looks great on film, man. He is just dusting defensive backs every single which way. He's averaging nearly 9 targets per game. There's still talent. There's still upside. And everything should be course correcting as it goes along here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. To me, Calvin Ridley is an excellent buy low at this moment. And 4th easiest remaining strength of schedule for fantasy wide receivers. We're starting to collect a little more data on these teams. So that indication there of the strength of schedule, it carries a little more weight now. At the beginning of the season, I don't really care about that. But going into week 4, you start to pay attention to those things.
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons a buy low window can open up here is because all of the big concerns we had about Calvin Ridley going into the season have come to fruition in the last 2 weeks now. We were saying, he might be a little bit rusty, and sure enough, he's dropped some balls in the last 2 weeks, which is very unlike Calvin Ridley. We saw him as sure-handed as can be through the early point of his career, so I'm kind of chalking that up to just rust. I don't expect him to continue dropping balls throughout the rest of the year. And then the other big concern was that he has shown some signs of being injury-prone, that he would always pick up these nagging injuries, and we've seen him get nicked up a little bit in the last 2 weeks and get taken off the field and back on the field. So I think that those two concerns are now coming to fruition in a very small sample size. But if you were a believer in Calvin Ridley before the season, look at what you saw in week 1. That should be more than enough for you to realize that he can still play at an elite level. So I really like that buy low. I hadn't really thought about buying low on Ridley anywhere, but I think you've intrigued me a little bit. I might throw some offers out after this show.
I mean, it might be time. I don't think either of us were in on him at his draft cost, but now you're buying a guy who everyone was buying as a top 12, top 15 wide receiver, and you're essentially buying him at wide receiver 30 cost. I don't think many people believe he's actually wide receiver 30, but maybe at top 24 cost. So there is a little bit of a dip here.
Can we victory lap our take yet that we had in the offseason where we said,
No.
he's a fine cost, but the one that really is kind of crazy is that he's going ahead of Keenan Allen. And you and I were both very much so in the Keenan Allen ahead of Calvin Ridley camp. So, it's only week 3. I don't want to get too obnoxious with the victory lap.
I'll allow it. Keenan Allen looks very good.
Looking fantastic. Yeah.
Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert look very good. I'll allow it.
All right.
All right. Let's move on here. Dave, you're going to give us your third and final buy low trade target. And I got to say, I'm going to prepare the ship. I'm going to get my bow and arrow with a little flame here, and I might be ready to send your carcass out for a Viking funeral after this one. Good luck, sir.
Well, I'm not talking about a Viking. I'm talking about a Falcon. But yeah, get your tomatoes ready. I can't believe I'm doing this, man. I really can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm talking about Kyle Pitts here. And this needs to come with a heavy dose of context, all right? You're not buying Kyle Pitts at the tight end 5, tight end 6 cost that he acquired in the offseason. Right now, you are buying him for nothing. I'm recommending taking like the running back 5 on your team, the wide receiver 6 on your team, and throwing some offers out there to see if you can pull Kyle Pitts in. I mean, it's bad. Get your laughs in, throw your tomatoes. I know that this is ridiculous that I'm saying to buy Kyle Pitts right now, but he's playing the exact role that we had envisioned for him. He is lined up in line as a tight end in just 12 of 102 snaps this year. I mean, he's not playing tight end whatsoever. 60% of his snaps have come out of the slot. 48% of his snaps have come out wide, and his 32.8% air yard share is best among all tight ends. And not just for tight ends, his air yard share is in the same range as guys like Puka Nacua and CeeDee Lamb. I mean, he's getting elite usage. He's pulling his targets nearly 12 yards downfield. Of course, we know what the obvious issue is. Desmond Ridder kind of stinks. Like he's not really a good quarterback.
Kinda.
Catchable target rate of 50%. Half of the balls going Kyle Pitts' way are catchable right now. I mean, just absolutely abysmal. So like I said, I'm not saying to go out and sell the farm for Kyle Pitts. I'm not even saying to put him in your week 4 starting lineup. But right now, there's probably some managers out there that are just saying, get this guy off my team. I don't want him anymore. So throw out the bottom of your bench guys for Kyle Pitts. I'd rather trade away my, like I said, RB5 than have to spend fab on him when he inevitably hits waiver wires. And the thing is, you're probably not starting him as long as he's on the Falcons, but something's got to give. Either they're going to bring in a new quarterback, they're going to put Taylor Heineke in the starting lineup. Maybe he gets traded. The reason I'm saying this is more of just a game theory take than anything else. Kyle Pitts is a wildly talented player. It can't possibly get worse than it is right now.
Oh,
so
never
just
say
buying
that.
at an all-time low. It can't. How could it possibly get worse than what we've seen right now?
We're entering spooky season here, Dave. Are you a horror movie fan? That's like saying I'll be right back, and they're never back. You don't say it can't get worse.
Tell me how it can possibly get worse. Like, sure, his leg could fall off. I mean, it could get worse. You know, I don't want to go to the extremes, but it could technically get worse. But right now, looking at his output, I mean, this guy, 4.4 points, 1.5 points, 3.7 points, as he is leading his team in air yard share, playing an elite role that we see every other tight end playing in. Like, he is in the same role as Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, these tight ends that play exclusively as wide receivers. He's in the same role as Sam Laporta. We know that Desmond Ridder is terrible. So I think even a slight improvement to the quarterback situation, which would be Taylor Heineke. Like if they finally make the switch at some point and say, you know what, Ridder, it's been fun. Go ride pine. We're going to give Heineke the start. All of a sudden, Kyle Pitts becomes a top 10 tight end at that point and has immense upside every single week. Or if they say, we've got Drake London, we got Bijan Robinson, we got Kyle Pitts, we can't possibly feed all of these guys. We're going to trade Kyle Pitts at the trade deadline. If he lands in a good ecosystem, he's a top 3 tight end. So
they won't do that because it'll make people too happy
for pennies.
No, they won't trade him because that would make fantasy managers too happy. And Arthur Smith hates fantasy football. So Kyle Pitts, his best performance this season, still scored less points than Sam Laporta's worst performance this season.
You don't have to tell me. I know it, man.
I want to do this just for the people watching and listening. You ready? TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram, Travis Kelce, Donald Parham, George Kittle, Darren Waller, Tyler Higbee, Luke Musgrave, Jake Ferguson, Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, Hayden Hurst, Pat Fryermuth, Kylan Granson, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett. Those are all the tight ends ranked ahead of Kyle Pitts right now in terms of scoring on the season. It's rough out there.
You don't have to tell me.
It's rough out there. I will say this. The part that intrigues me the most is the idea that Taylor Heineke could take over at quarterback. That's the part that all the other stuff, like the air yard share, and like I get it. And this is going to be one of those things where it's probably going to draw the line between the stat nerds and everyone else who's get out of your spreadsheets, right? Because in theory, all of those numbers you mentioned should make sense. He is in the right role. The question I always like to ask is, what does that role mean if it's on the Falcons with Desmond Ridder? That role definitely changes if it's Taylor Heineke. So I can get behind on that. I'm just, oh, it's rough. I actually did get some questions about people asking, should I drop Kyle Pitts? So that's
And
where we're
that's the
at.
thing. I mean, if you want to just go pick him up and stash him as your tight end too, I think he's absolutely worth it. I mean, this is just very much so a situation of betting on the talent and blindly ignoring the situation in hopes that the situation changes. Like I said, I'm not saying that you need to go out and pay what the offseason price is, but the fact that people are wondering whether they should drop him, I mean, why just get ahead of it right now rather than getting in a bidding war when he does inevitably hit waivers. Just pick him up. Like I said, I'm not recommending starting him right now, but if you've got 8+ bench spots and you can afford to keep him stashed, he is a change situation away from being an elite tight end. As long as he's on the Falcons and as long as Desmond Ridder is starting, you're probably not feeling comfortable about putting him in your lineup, but he still is showing the peripherals that he can be an elite tight end in a different situation. So go out and buy, a dollar for a penny right now, and that's what you're getting in Kyle Pitts.
All right, I'm going to finish this off here with my third, and I had nothing else to add to Kyle Pitts. I can't in good conscience do it, Dave. But I like what you're selling. I just won't buy it. It's kind of like a ShamWow. It looks really cool on TV, and I'm like, that seems useful. Not going to buy it though.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'll come back with a good infomercial that I can comp
flex
Kyle Pitts
tape.
to.
That's what Kyle Pitts. That's what Kyle Pitts is. Kyle Pitts is flex tape.
No, because flex tape actually like fixes things. Kyle
no,
Pitts
it
isn't
does not.
fixing
I've
your
used
roster. I haven't. I mean, you can just slap a hole on a leaking barrel of water. Kyle Pitts isn't going to do that for your lineup. He's not going to help a thing.
I've never put it on my canoe whilst in the canoe in a lake. No, never done it. All right, let's move on here. I'm going to give you my third and final buy low trade target here, and it's Jordan Addison, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. And this one, I started to look into it, and it just made so much sense. It's a guy that really has yet to fully break out yet, but almost had 3 touchdowns in 3 games here to start his career. Kirk Cousins missed him on his potential 3rd touchdown of the season here. But right now, Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins leads the league in pass attempts. Vikings are 0-3, right, Dave? I didn't mess that up. I want to make sure. 0-3. Yep. Defense is not good.
What were they last year? Was it like 10-1 in one-score games?
I'm pulling this
off the top of my head, but again, a regression to the mean.
Yep. Thank you. Let's drive that point home. Regression to the mean. But the Vikings are 0-3. That defense, not good. And we've seen that as long as a wide receiver has passing volume, things can turn in a good direction for them. And what we also see too is with rookie wide receivers, it takes time. Even the best ones. Justin Jefferson, his own teammate there on the Minnesota Vikings. So we've seen it within the same organization that a guy who, legendary, right? Future Hall of Famer, if everything continues to go the way it is, he didn't take off until week 4. Now, I'm not suggesting we're going to see the exact same trajectory and Jordan Addison becomes a star player, but if you've watched any of the Minnesota Vikings, Jordan Addison is pretty darn good. He is another guy that is out here, very similar to Calvin Ridley. That was the pro comp for him for a lot of people as he was coming out of USC. Great route runner, maybe didn't have the killer speed, but he wins deep, he creates separation, and he's a sure-handed wide receiver. While also maybe not being the biggest guy, but it works for him. And so we've seen this Minnesota Vikings offense, they're continuing to work Jordan Addison a bit more into the strategy, into the game scheme each week. Snap count is going up, snap percentage is going up, route participation is going up, and he's still 3rd on the team in targets. He's being out targeted. Excuse me. He is out targeting KJ Osborne by quite a bit on the year. So
KJ Osborne just has the touchdowns.
Yeah. And so like for this, it's not even just that the participation is going up or the plays, whatever. It's actually in week 3, he tied TJ Hawkinson for the most first read targets on the team.
Wow.
So for a rookie to step into an offense where he is leading the team in first read targets, where Justin Jefferson is on that team, TJ Hawkinson is on that team, it shows that we need to respect Jordan Addison's game. He's a guy that's going to continue to be used. The role there is going to continue to grow. And I don't foresee this Minnesota Vikings offense scheme changing anytime soon where they're not going to be passing the ball.
Yeah, and we talked about this a lot in the offseason, right? Like, if you're drafting rookies, you've got to exercise patience. Don't be the guy who dropped Justin Jefferson. Don't be the guy who dropped Christian Watson. Don't be that guy. Exercise patience. You bought into these rookies knowing that it was going to take time for them to warm up. And I can't tell you, Alfredo, how many waiver wires I checked this morning, going through my Sleeper app. Sleeper, the best platform out there. Shout out Sleeper. We love you guys. Going through this morning, though, and I see Tank Bigsby, Zach Charbonnet, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith-Njigba, all of these players are getting dropped. And it's like, if you drafted a rookie and you're upset that you didn't get production in the first 3 weeks, why did you draft the rookie? Like, that these guys come on later in the season. So I would go out and say, just to riff off of your Jordan Addison buy low, that you should be buying low on every underperforming rookie right now, whether it's Jackson Smith-Njigba, the other guys I mentioned, Tank Bigsby, or Zach Charbonnet. These are all guys that I expect to see their roles increase as the season goes on. And if anybody's getting concerned this early in the season that their rookie isn't producing, go out and try to buy him.
Yeah, I mean, they can't all be record setters in their first few games, Devon Achane and Puka Nacua. Like, it's not going to happen that way. But there's tons of really talented players that we've seen this year after year. These rookies, their production begins to ramp up as the season goes on. So I actually love that call. It's just an overall blanket statement is be willing to go out there and get those rookie wide receivers, rookie running backs, any of those rookies that might be underperforming a little bit at the moment.
This show got my wheels turning, man. I'm going to be spending the next hour just firing off trades in all of my leagues. This is a good one. I'm thinking my wheels are spinning right now.
Good. Well, I mean, I hope we were able to help the audience here start to get the wheels turning on some of their trades. And we're going to be back tomorrow with our starts of the week for week 4. We've been doing pretty good so far, Dave. Not bad. I gotta do all the maths and get into my spreadsheets and find out what our success rate has been on these starts of the weeks, but not bad so far. We'll be back tomorrow with those week 4 starts of the week. As always, big thank you to my co-host, Dave Kluge. Big thank you to our production team, Julia, Dylan, and Jagger. You guys make this thing run. And as always, thank all of you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Adios.